Hey, horror fans, welcome back to Jay vs. Horror and another episode of Hardcore Horror Reviews. Today we're going to be talking about one of the most disturbing films I've ever seen, The Strange Things About the Johnsons. Now, this film was actually Ari Aster's first film. It was a student film he did uh, back in 2011. It was written by Ari, and the film stars Billy Mayo, Brandon Greenhouse, and Angela Bullock as members of a suburban family in which the son is involved in an abusive relationship with his father. The short was Ari's thesis film while studying at the American Film Institute's graduate school in California, and later it screened at the film festival in 2011, premiering at Sundance in Utah on January 22nd, before it was leaked online in November and went viral. The story was first conceived while discussing taboos with friends, including Greenhouse, before Oster's first year at AFI. He worked on the production with fellow students from that school. So let's talk about the strange thing about the Johnsons. Guys, I had to go back and rewatch this one. I've seen it a couple times, but it is actually very hard to watch, and it has what I call the Hitchcock effect, where Hitchcock and Psycho showed very little, but people remembered it to be much more. Also, I think it's even more prevalent in things like Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where you don't see near as much as you actually remember seeing. So, kind of a Mandela effect, where the scenes that are bad aren't really as bad as you remember. They're just so terribly implied that you remember them worse than they actually were. And the things about the Johnsons is probably the most, in my opinion, one of the most disturbing films I've ever seen. Uh, it starts out with a little boy. I'd say he's about 12 years old, and he's in his bedroom masturbating. The father comes to the door without knocking, and the boy pulls covers up over himself. And so the father has a discussion with him about masturbation and how all humans do it. There's nothing to be ashamed of, and that it's not actually a taboo. It's just something that people don't talk about, even though everyone does it or has tried it. And the boy asks him if he does it, and he says, yes, everyone has done this. It's not anything you need to be ashamed of. And so it's, in a way, kind of a heartwarming moment because the dad handles this issue very well. But then the story changes, folks. The dad leaves the room and shuts the door. And after he does this, we see the boy was holding a picture in his hand while he was masturbating. And as he lays back down, the picture falls to the bed, and we see that the picture is a picture of his father. Yeah. So then we move on. I think it's about 14 years later, and we see that the son, Isaiah, is now getting married. And then no one can. They're having like a little party, wedding party for them at the Johnson's house. And the mother starts looking for the father and Isaiah, and she slips off to the where the fence is, and there's a little hole in the fence, and she looks through the fence and sees that Sidney, the father, is being forced to perform fellatio on the son, Isaiah. And we don't see it totally, but we understand what's happening, and it's implied that she does too, but wants to not see it. So she kind of just walks away and represses this. And I think here it's implied that there's probably been some other times where she's repressed the same type of thing. So then we see they're getting ready for dinner. They're having a family dinner, and the mother tells Isaiah to go get his father, and he's in his office working on a book. Sidney is the father, and he's a poet and writer. He's working on a book called Cocoon Man: Confessions by Sidney Johnson. And he's got it up on his computer, and we hear Isaiah coming up the stairs to get his father, and he hears him too and starts to freak out. You can tell he's terrified of his son. And so he starts to try to turn the computer off, and there's a little bit of a tense scene here where we don't know if he's going to be able to get this off the screen before the boy comes in. And I'm calling him a boy because he's so young in the opening scene, but by now he's probably 26 or something like that. So luckily, Isaiah just pops his head in real quick and says, "Dad, it's time for dinner." And we go to the next scene. And the next scene, we see Isaiah uh, at a party with his wife, and the dad is there, and he's really going hard at his wife, making out with her extremely, grossly. And at the same time, the entire time this is going on, he's staring at his father and giving him this evil look. And so then we move on to Sidney trying to take his manuscript, Cocoon Man, and he wants to show it to his wife. He wants to just expose everything that's happened. And so he takes the manuscript into their bedroom and he slides it underneath her pillow. And you can tell that apparently he's planning on just leaving. He has his hat and his jacket and everything, and I think he's just planning on leaving the family and being done with all this. And so then Isaiah comes in and says the toilet in his bathroom's not working. He needs to use theirs. And Sidney kind of freaks out a little bit and says, "You can't go in there. Your mother's in the shower." And Isaiah says, "It's no problem. I'll wait." So he goes into the bedroom, and of course he finds the manuscript. And so then we have a scene where he confronts Sidney about all this, and he's mad. He burns the manuscript. And then he's back with his wife and tells her that he's going out. He'll be back later that night. And so then we have a scene where Sidney is in the bathtub. He's taking a bath. He's got a Walkman in there with him, and he's listening to some self-affirmation things, things that tell you that, your day is not that bad. Think about this and all that stuff. But actually, his days have been pretty terrible. But Sidney is in the bathtub, and all of a sudden, the doorknob starts to move. It's locked. And the next thing we see is just Isaiah just bursts through the door. He kicks the door open and goes in and sexually assaults Sidney. Now, this is one of those scenes, guys, where I was talking about where it kind of has that Mandela effect, because I remembered it being way worse than it was. It really just kind of shows him coming through the door, and you see the horror on Sidney's face because he knows what's about to happen. And then there is a scene where it's kind of out of frame, but you see Isaiah pulling his trousers back up and walking out. And it's just terrible, man. It is so heartbreakingly terrible. And so in the next scene, Isaiah confronts Sidney again and tells him that, I know you think I'm a monster, but you're not looking at this the right way. You never gave our relationship a chance. It's so weird the way he's talking to him, and he's also doing the things that abusers do where they try to blame the victim and tell them that it's their fault and that they're a loser. It's all their fault. They've ruined everything good in their life, and they're ruining this. And so Sidney just makes a run for it. He's out the door of the house and runs out into the street and is unfortunately struck by a speeding truck. And so then we see Isaiah just lose it. He loses it, oh God, my dad has died and all this. And then we see the funeral for Sidney, and after that, we're back at the house, and we have Isaiah and his mother, and she finally confronts Isaiah about everything that's happened and tells him that she knew, 10 years ago on his prom night that something was wrong then, but she decided to deny it. And she flat out tells him, "You're a monster. You killed your father. I know what's happened." And, of course, she has the manuscript now. She's found the manuscript that Sidney retyped. And they have an epic battle here at the end. I won't ruin the very end, guys. I feel like I've told you a lot already. The movie is only 29 minutes long. So this is another short film. And like I've said before, I usually don't talk about short films that much. But this one is so impactful and so perverse and weird that it had to be brought up in this series of reviews, hardcore horror reviews. It is insane. And when this thing got leaked online, there's like 5 million views for the YouTube version of this. And there's even several reaction videos where people have watched it and done reaction videos, and those have hundreds of thousands of hits on YouTube. So that's, but at the same time, even though I'm saying that, there's still, I run into people all the time who have never heard about this film. They love Ari Aster, they love Hereditary, they love Midsummer, but they've never heard of this film. And so I've been hesitant in the past to even tell people to go watch this because, like I said before I rewatched it, I just remembered it being so much worse than it was because everything that's implied or shown just a little bit is enough to make you sick to your stomach. It's also heartbreaking, and I think what Ari does here is give us a reverse look at abuse in American families. Usually, what we know of is that the parent, if there is abuse in a family, it's usually the parents abusing the child. So we never get to see it in a reverse manner, and that's what Ari does here. Guys, I am going to put a link for the strange things about the Johnsons in this description for this video, and I'll let you guys go check it out for yourself if you want to. Now, I normally would be hesitant about doing that, but like I said, after going back and rewatching it, it's not as, I don't know, it's not as graphic with imagery as I remembered it to be, but the little bits of imagery that you do get will stick with you forever. It's not something that you're ever going to be able to forget. So if you don't want to have to break out the Ajax and scrub your brain, maybe don't go watch this one, I would say. And it is very perverse, but there is something to what Ari is saying here. And at the least, guys, you can see that Ari was, even at this point in 2011, going to be a great filmmaker at some point. So that's all we got for today, guys. That's all I can really talk about with the strange thing about the Johnsons. Strange things about the Johnsons, I should say. But yeah, it's a great cast, interesting movie, and of course a great director who would go on to make a couple pretty good movies. I'm not the biggest fan of Hereditary and Midsummer, but there are things that I like in those movies very much, and then there are things that I could do without. I think in Hereditary, some of the cult stuff in Hereditary is a little over the top, and after we get to the end scene of Hereditary, I would have rewritten that. I didn't necessarily like the very last scene of that, and then in Midsummer, it feels like we're watching Ari masturbate for real because it's just so much style over substance in that movie. There are great scenes in Midsummer, and there's great narrative stuff like the family dying at the beginning and all these things that lead to where the story goes, but just it feels like hours. I know it's not, but it feels like hours of this cult dancing and all the stylistic stuff with that. It just feels like it's over the top. We kind of feel like a lot of people have said that Midsummer is just a ripoff of The Wicker Man. I don't think it's a ripoff of it. I think it's a little derivative of it. But I think all things are a little derivative of everything because everything we see contributes to any originality that we have. And that's true for all directors. I mean, if you look at Carpenter and guys like that, they've obviously taken from all their favorite directors. But you take the good stuff, you leave the bad stuff behind, and then you add your own originality to it. And so that's all we have for this week, guys. Or I say this week, but I'll probably be back tomorrow with another one. Another hardcore horror review. And guys, we will talk to you the next time we've got something worth talking about. Bye.